for the introduction. I'm in the Department of Family Medicine and also have a role in Cohort 4 as Director for Practice-Based Research, which involves directing the Practice-Based Research Network Collaborative. So we've got about 5-6 PDRNs that work together on that. I'm really pleased to be able to talk a little bit about boot camp translation. We'd originally scheduled this so that Jack Westphal could co-present with me. Fortunately, Jack had something come up and isn't able to be here. So if there's any real burning questions you've got, you can refer to Jack. Just kidding. So boot camp translation is a methodology that really developed out of Jack and Linda Dillon, who's the director for the Research Network. Their work with Research Network around specific topic areas. I'll go through a few of those with you today, but it's really now at the point where we're kind of starting to develop some routines. The goal is to get a manual put together that's now being drafted so that other groups can have kind of a cookbook, probably not the best word, but at least a series of steps that you can go through to use this for your own work. And we're actually hoping we can pilot test that manual in this art grant that Elaine mentioned that will be involving both our own PDRNs here in Colorado, but 3 others, one in Oregon, one in Wisconsin, and one in Iowa. Because as a project, they're actually going to have to get their feet wet with this. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So just a brief outline of what I'm going to try to cover today. Why would we need something like boot camp translation, and what's it really work at addressing best? What is it, and why might you want to use it as a methodology? And also maybe a little bit about what it's not good for, what it really shouldn't be used for, what it's not a substitute for. I think it's important to kind of get that out. And then we'll go through kind of step by step what are the actual things to do as part of the translation process. And then we'll go through some examples. Hopefully have lots of time for questions and answers. There's a movie that probably all of us are familiar with, Field of Dreams, and the famous Field of Dreams line, you know, of, well, if you build it, they will come. And this really gets at the problem that boot camp translation is designed to address, which is the fact that most of our research, certainly clinical research, has taken kind of this stance of, you know, if we build it, if we study it, if we design a particular intervention, then, you know, folks are just going to be the door to use it, and it's going to work exactly the same way no matter where we implement it, all of that. And we all know that that's really not the case. It takes a long time to get some of even the best evidence in practice. The example I always like to quote, because it's something I deal with clinically all the time, is hypertension and the all-hat results of using just basic diuretics and beta blockers. You know, it's taken years to get that into routine practice. And the side of our patients and community, things that we know are important, you know, like immunization, those kinds of things, it can take even longer to get that stuff out into routine practice. And I was really pleased to see that at the NIH's recent meeting last month on community engagement, the head of NCAT, which is the NIH center that oversees all of the CTSA recipients and all the various institutions. I mean, he really gets it. He gave an eloquent description of how, if it works like we do in healthcare, they've come up with a set of genes that, no right mind would ever wear, or put it together in their own little lab, and then suddenly this would appear on the shelf, and, no chance of selling it. Business understands this. If you get consumers involved from the very beginning and use them then to also help design how you're going to market and get stuff out in front of people. And we're just now figuring this out. So that's really what's going on with boot camp. This is a quote that comes from a paper that came out earlier this year, and the references in the slide material that's printed and will be available online in a couple of places. But this really, I think, in a nutshell, captures what boot camp is all about. So to try and take evidence-based guidelines and recommendations, change them from kind of the formalized medical information approach and language into a format that's accessible and really can engage community members. And I would also add to this that it's not just the language, but it's actually the delivery, how you're going to deliver this stuff out to folks, that boot camp is really helpful as well. So that's really what we're after here. There's some essential ingredients. I couldn't resist throwing in a picture from my travels, the nice meal that we had while we were in Germany. So first of all, you really have to have committed community members. So the community members need to feel like the topic that you're working on is important in order to spend the time that it takes to run this process. I think Jack and his group have had boot camps that in one shape or another have actually gone on beyond a year. That's kind of atypical, but it is a process that can run for a long time. So you need a topic that people really care about and can get engaged around. It's really, really, really important that you've got diverse perspectives represented in your group that you're pulling together. So I'll talk a little bit about how part of that has to do with perspectives not only on the community side, but also on the healthcare side. That can be helpful. But, just kind of having the usual people that might show up to your routine community advisory board meeting probably isn't going to give you the diversity that you might need. You might want to think about this certainly as you're setting up a group to do boot camp with, to try and get as diverse as possible group that you can. Here is one that I think I'm running a boot camp under Jack's tutelage. We, I think, started to refine our thinking a little bit, which is important group process is. Facilitating boot camp translation requires some basic group process skills, and I think it's, in a way, it's a little bit like running focus groups, but I think there's also, a little bit of a different angle to this because it is a longitudinal kind of thing. So it's not like a focus group where you just get together one time and then you might not meet with that same group again. And you really have to begin to think about some of the things that, get talked about in the process literature, like, you can expect some storming that's going to happen, and how to handle that, and then, related to discount support. So there's some of that understanding how to make sure that it's safe for people to be able to freely express their opinion is really important. Dealing with group members that tend to dominate the conversation. And I think we learned that group camp that we just ran, we had been kind of on hiatus over the summer, and groups forgot to graduate. And so we had to, in midstream of our face-to-face meetings, had to say, okay, guys, let's ground rules. We're kind of getting off track. So having some facility with that is really, really important. What you can't not, what is not good for. So it's not a board that they can already become an intervention or process. So it's not good for an off-the-shelf group with an off-the-shelf process. It's not designed to gain community buy-in for project again. So different kind of group. That's important to understand. One of the things that is sometimes difficult, as I'm trying to explain, you don't know at the start of running the camp where you're going to end up. It's difficult sometimes to fit this into kind of standard way we think of project protocol running, where it's very much A, B, C, D, unless you can follow one after another. Not always like that. So it's kind of an emergent process from that standpoint as well. So if you have a project that, really requires a tight timeline and you've got to hit certain points at certain spots, we might not be good for this. We're going to push the envelope a little bit in our art project. We've got some timelines there, so it's going to be interesting to see how it works if you test for that. That does work extremely well for translating proven intervention into routine community use. So the case, if you will, was using a boot camp process to increase colorectal cancer screening rate in Colorado. That was really the first project where they used this kind of process. It's now been applied to hypertension. So things that we know work, but we don't know how to get people engaged with, how to get them moving on. We don't know how to talk about people with. It's really, really good for that. So this is, some of these issues are subtle, and we can talk about that for some very quick answer. Just an example from this paper that was published in May in the Journal of the American Board of Family Medicine of what topics that this has been used for so far. So colorectal cancer prevention, you can see kind of what happened. It was a year-long process, face-to-face meetings with 8 phone calls over that year. And you can see the outcome. So a message disseminated stuff to more than 300 community members. Community members, and maybe did random visit dialing, had some exposure to the materials that were produced through the boot camp process. They saw increases in colonoscopies and overall screening. Some of the products that they developed, so a farm auction flyer that talked about the need for colon cancer screening. Coffee mugs was another product that they produced out of that. Asthma was kind of the second one that they did, an 8-month process, 4 face-to-face meetings, 5 phone calls, and you can see kind of the outcomes on that. High blood pressure home monitoring, research, and then some of the things that have been in the process of being worked on, health risk assessments, how do you get those into routine use. They've taken the basic hypertension stuff that was done in Eastern Province being translated now to urban Latinos, both in English and Spanish. Submitted for publication. We've got a diabetes group that I'm running right now that we started last January, and I think we're going to finish up probably in October. We'll have had a total of, I think, 4 face-to-face meetings, something around 8 phone calls in that group, and the primary product that's going to come out of that will be basically 2 things. One is a page that a practice can use with their patients for newly diagnosed with diabetes. Here's what you need to know when you're diagnosed with diabetes. Then beyond that, some more material that patients can use with their providers, with their practice, and patient process about diabetes. Actually work. So starts off with a kickoff. Is typically a day-long session, and it's divided up into 2 sections. That first is really designed to get onto the same page. So in that first meeting, typically there'll be a topic expert come in and give what healthcare would recognize as a basic fundamental lecture on a particular topic. First is that it's that basic lecture that slows down. So literally, after each slide, the presenter pauses and says, okay, what did you guys hear me say? What do you have about this? What didn't make sense? Every slide literally gets unpacked. And so each slide, you may spend 15 minutes on, 5 minutes talking about the expert talking about the slide, and then another 10 to 15 minutes where the group just makes sure that they have the support. Getting everybody on the same page in that first meeting. And then the second part of that first meeting is then the group brainstorming, reacting to what they've heard and what they've heard. I'll refer back to the diabetes group that we did. We had our first meeting, it was January this year, and through that initial session where the experts in this case was going to do diabetes and all this. So one of the first things that came up from one of the group members is, we told a lot of information, but I've always heard that diabetes is about sugar. You didn't say anything about sugar. We didn't. We didn't say anything about sugar. We talked about carbohydrates, and all this other stuff, but sugar as a term, we didn't unpack that. We spent some time right then and there and said, okay, deal with sugar, and kind of talked about that. is that something that you think we need to make sure whatever we produce as an end product needs to include, yeah, got to have something in there about food. Okay, great. Another thing that came up fairly close after that was, when I was first diagnosed, I had family members that, had diabetes, and, for them it was like a death. To get the food, I had this deer in the headlights, so we spent some time talking about that. So one of the messages that's on the first page is, this is not a death sentence. It's really important to get out there. So that first day-long meeting that you're hearing will really start to set up all of that. Meetings then. A little bit about those, and then also you're starting to focus in on a very particular aspect. So I can't remember because I was so okay. I do have individual slides. So first meeting, day-long in person. We're really getting engaged in the topic. The telephone meeting, 30 minutes, or no more than that. On the evening, bigger issue with the draft. So 5 to 30 minutes. So just 30 minutes because that seems to be well, yes. Okay. Yeah, I can still. No problem. Even because we want to make sure that everybody can be there. So, it's a little bit of a hassle for us, but, it's not for us. That's one topic or issue. So, things that we did at the end of the diabetes group was we actually spent a couple of phone calls on, okay, let's get these first page messages down. What needs to be on the first page? So we spent one 30-minute phone call just talking about the things that we can do in the initial face-to-face. Another phone call that was draft of the first page. Okay, did we get this? Did we have a topic right? Language is so important. And it's really, really important to our community members how things are customized. The colon prevention project, one of the first things they heard of that was the word colorectal didn't make any sense. Colon cancer. Yeah, we really recommend involved. It's too jargony, just talk about colon. And don't call it screening. You don't know what screening is. Nobody understands that word. Just need to get checked for colon cancer. Make it simple. So that's things that you can usually hammer out in one of these 30-minute sessions. The other thing that we used it for is what I mentioned. That's what we put together with the last meeting. Now, one thing I will say that telephone meetings are not good for is if you want to do, if you have a lot of words, that's too much. In that kind of a session, we get into an issue with that one time. But face-to-face. So the face-to-face first one are usually about a half day long. So the ones that we've done, we'll start with 1 year and then run until 3:30, 4 o'clock. And these face-to-face meetings are useful to kind of expand the group thinking, kind of idea unpack, We also, one of our face-to-face meetings out, and we got diabetes educational material from every freaking source we could find. And really had stuff arranged on the table in this room, and we divided everybody up into groups, and we went around on the station and talked about the materials, they went through them. You know, we had one of our teams kind of groups kind of take notes on what people said about stuff. You know, some of the comments like, this picture's great, this one's complicated, you know, and we had probably material from about 20 different sources. Number one, there was no one source that everybody liked, that is, they got right, but it was pieces. Well, I really like this figure from this source, I like this information here, this could have been done a little bit better, but mostly they got it right. So what we got out of that was, okay, we've got to pull from all these different sources, put together whatever we want. So a lot of times these face-to-face meetings will then result in work with scientific teams. So we've got homework to do after that. And the other thing is they're useful for us to get feedback on the product draft. So once we've got the product kind of drafted, we can get the group together and really get them to lay eyes on it and give you feedback in a face-to-face meeting. The common points about the actual steps of the process is this is very iterative. Face meeting, you might have 3 or 4 of those, and there was at one point where we actually had a telephone meeting scheduled and on the book, and we were kind of getting ready for it, and a couple days ahead of time, we said, no, it really doesn't make sense for us to have a telephone. We actually have more work to do on it. So we canceled the telephone meeting. So that's the other thing that is important is to understand that just because you've got a meeting scheduled, if you really then want to dig in after your last session and decide, well, maybe it doesn't make sense for us to do that, it's okay to step back from that. You're going to emerge from the process. You're not going to know exactly what this is going to look like when you get started. And it's really, really important to reinforce at every step that my stuff that everybody's working on is you have ownership of it. So, you know, out of this, it's important that you become with the product. This is a product of this group. I think incredibly good at this. The main article that published in May and everybody contributed to that paper, everybody's name is on it. It's really pretty incredible. That really helps kind of then to see the group and people that are involved in that way and know that that's how the operators will sign up for more. So the diabetes, I'm talking about, I won't repeat much of that. Again, we've been running now for 9, we'll probably end it. And what we're working on right now is finalizing our manual, our brochure that then will be available for us to use. And we've got a meeting on the books next month, face-to-face meeting, whether the final product will kind of celebrate that. So this art RA team that I mentioned, for PBRN, that are involved in this. And what we're going to do in InStep is we're going to basically, in a website, go to EPR, and our team in Colorado is going to work with the local team to teach them boot camp techniques. Currently run the first face-to-face meeting, and then got the ball and take it from there. And well, intervention that they're going to really be doing the most intense boot camp work in their network is going to involve just a little bit more than 2 months. So it's going to be really complex. The other boot camp that we've done before is come to the boot camp are going to be not just community members and patients, but also people from practices, practice staff, and practice providers. And okay, we call these self-management tool sets. That makes sense what modify patient things that we would actually in the business that's trying to help people with this what makes sense to do. So really if we less than learn about it, I guess to see what they do with self-management. I'm guessing that's going to go out to the it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. So we randomized the order of the network participation, so we're starting in Oregon, and then we moved to Wisconsin and Iowa and finish up. So it's an 18-month total project. Asthma disparities is one that we're actually right now reporting on Wednesday as a submission. And so with this one, what we're going to do is we're going to take the boot camp process to translate standard asthma based guidelines into routine use in the 2040 neighborhood. So this is going to be focused on Latino and Hispanic populations. So we have special announcement right now for those groups. In kind of an interesting way, because the first year of this project is funded, we're going to run it standard. We're going to standard material off the shelf. And we're in some years of the project, we're going to say that the boot camp has translated and be able to compare the two. So that'll be really interesting. I think with the interesting thing to me with I talked about you have to have topics that your communities are interested in and engaged around. So asthma is something that 2040 has been on their top list for a long time. So we've got lots of buy-in from the community folks who've been putting this together. Self-management, when we went out and got trying to get letters of support from practices overwhelmed with practices interested in working on it. So we actually ended up gathering 4 practices in each network for them. About more than 4. So we were in total with an actually participate. In that, because that probably wasn't an issue either. Get engaged around that topic. We've got about 15 minutes left. I'm going to stop there with hopefully you guys have questions. We can dig into this a little bit more. About